morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku network starting on March 1st. We'll be giving you directions of where to access our live shows on global TV. Now, today, I want to welcome you to our show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, how we're going to navigate through a pandemic, which seems to be coming to an end, but we're not sure, maybe not. And we encourage you from around the world to engage with us, talk to us. And I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. Today, I want to base my commentary on just some reading I've been doing, listening to some podcasts, reading some New York Times articles about democracy on the decline and what this crisis in Russia might mean long term for the future of the world order. Really, it's been on decline worldwide for more than 15 years. And the major reason is authoritarian leaders, the rise, like Vladimir Putin. And we had to examine why these invasions are really dangerous for future geopolitical trends. Well, it's been decades that Vladimir Putin has been in power. He's been rebuilding Russia's military and weakening their enemies. He's repeatedly undermined democratic movements and popular uprisings all around the world. He's meddled in Western elections. The invasion of Ukraine, which is the largest war in Europe since World War II, is an escalation of this behavior at highest levels we have never seen before. The country's fall would mark a violent end to a world democracy and would begin an era when an autocratic government can invade, violate Pax Americana and international treaties and expand their air territory. China can now do the same with Taiwan. India could do this with Pakistan or vice versa. And democracies all over the world would just fail and falter. And the world order would be in a chaotic, almost state of world war. Our governments in democracies have tried to pull sanctions and economic sanctions, but this didn't work when he invaded Crimea. And now China is saying they've approved Russian wheat imports. So economically, we're not going to be able to get this dictator to stop what he's doing. I think back to when I was at Emory University in college. The collapse of the Soviet Union was an exciting time for all of us as we celebrated Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika. All of us remember the falling of the Berlin Wall when President Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, turn down that wall." At that time, many Eastern European democracies were born. It was like the end of a Star Wars movie where we thought freedom and hope and opportunity would prevail. Sort of like the Jedi after the return of the Jedi. But here we are, decades later, arguing the same thing. Can democracies survive? Vladimir Putin, as I close my monologue, described the fall of the Soviet Union, I quote, as the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of the century, a time period that included 2 world wars and a Holocaust. He has suggested he wants to reverse that collapse. He is an ideologue. He wants to bring back the imperial Russia, an imperial Russia working with China that can take on the world. I could go on, but at the end of the day, I think, in my opinion, that democracy has declined globally because democratic leaders have done little to stand up for themselves. Venezuela, Nicaragua, other countries as well, Afghanistan, Tunisia, 1 out of every 5 governments are now democratic. It used to be 1 in every 2. This is much bigger than the invasion of one democracy. This is about the future of democracy in the world. We're going to talk about that today. What will the United States response be? The NATO allies. Will Putin continue his aggression? Will he pull out? Or is Imperial Russia something that we might see in our own lifetime? With us today, we have Mark Lee.
And we've got a whole host of great guests and everything. I know that we've got Sasha Starr, who is here as well. And of course, he is a great chess player, broadcaster, publicist, and a number of other things as well. And of course, we've got Chris Greco, who is, of course, served in the military and has definitely done some amazing things in that regards. I'm sure that later on, Nick may be joining us. And of course, Shaquille from Australia will be joining us as well. So a lot of things to talk about, including what's going on in the world. I was just going to say that I noticed recently that one of our neutral countries, or at least a country that is known for being neutral, has also called out Russia as well, that being Switzerland, because they said that they have adopted the same sanctions against Russia as the European Union, following a decision by the Federal Council in Bern on today being Monday, and all of that. And the move was unusual for the traditionally neutral country, but not unexpected. And of course, the Swiss do have a lot of interest in the banking matter and all of that. So it sounds to me that that would be a major blow. So I guess I'll turn it over to Chris and Sasha what they think about that, since Switzerland has joined. And of course, we do know that they are a banking power, and a lot of the money, including Russian money, is in those accounts. So will those kind of sanctions halt what Putin is doing and has been doing now for several days?
Go ahead, Sasha. Go ahead. You go, Sasha.
Okay, it appears to me that finally West is waking up because the biggest country in the world with a nuclear arsenal is being really owned, not even managed, it's really owned by a madman who is obviously not a healthy man, and he's threatening now all the rest of the world. So the aim of Ukraine, and Ukraine is now fighting for all world for various reasons, because of NATO, because of this or that. Nobody is capable of fighting madman. Ukraine, the only one brave country in the world who is taking him on. And you know what I'm suspecting now? That it's not about to stop the invasion. No. Now the business is to prevail and actually to defeat Russians. That's what's the aim now. And now international brigades, similar to what's happened in Spain before the Second World War. Now international brigades are being formed in many European countries. A lot of Eastern European joining the brigades, because I'll tell you, you can't even imagine how many people in Europe want nothing but just to kill Russians, not to defeat, no, kill, actually kill. And this is what's ahead of us. Okay, I know that there are some peaceful negotiations are being, they will not yield anything simply because what Ukraine wants, ceasefire, withdraw all your troops. Russia will never do that because Putin will lose his power right away. And for Putin, his power more important than all life on earth and anything else.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I missed out on some of the other things that I was going to say. Was real quickly. I'll just bring up some other things that I said that we talked about the meddling of the elections. They're they're going into Crimea. And what's continuing to happen is that. I think that it really is about, and I'm going to ask Sasha this, and then I want to go to Chris. When the Soviet Union, I remember many years ago seeing Vladimir Putin on 60 Minutes, and I can't remember whether he was with Bill Whitaker or somebody, but his analogy was that in justifying where he was coming from, and this was before he was doing what he's doing now, because he says he's still not a communist. I mean, he says he's not a communist, even though he was in the KGB. But he said, how would the United States feel? And he was asking the 60 Minutes guy, if after the Civil War, all these states that were part of your nation were stripped away from you, right? Would you be happy with that as an American, right? And, because he says, that's the way I'm coming from, that the entire nation that I grew up in completely dissolved before my very own eyes. So do you think, Sasha, that what's driving this authoritarian dictator is the very simple fact that he wants his country back? He wants the Soviet Empire back? Or do you think that's just a bunch of hogwash and he's just ruthless and he just wants to take on the West?
He has to thank George W. Bush Sr., who failed to comprehend the importance of dissolve Soviet Union and getting away their nuclear arsenal. He failed to even comprehend that. This is why there is a huge deterioration of U.S. and actually Western politicians. They're becoming bureaucrats that only care about collecting their $200,000 salary and had free parking at the Dallas airport in Washington. They don't have imagination. They don't have a basic understanding even what's going on. So Putin has to say and thank all the leaders who were complacent when, including starting with Obama, who were complacent when he invaded and took over Crimea and some territories in Donbass region of Ukraine. So everything was going so far. He was never faced a punishment or even confronted about that issue. Even President Trump, he says that he has conflicting information from his intelligence services and Mr. Putin. He prefers to trust Mr. Putin. Okay, these are type of leaders that we have in the West. We have a leader who, look at Zelensky now, is the hero of all world. He is a leader of a free world right now. And look what's happened just a couple of years ago when Trump was trying to use his power to squeeze him in. The money were already allocated to Ukraine. Congress did that. So Trump has no business with this money. Yet he somehow convoluted that the money would be released based on that he will try to find some dirt on Mr. Biden, who was not even declared candidate for a president. This type of leaders that we have here in a free world. This is why Putin became emboldened, and now that's what he's doing. Now he's threatening to blow up our world, to start nuclear war. For what? For being unpunished and unconfronted for so many years. But he never fought Ukraine, really. Now he has Ukraine, and Ukraine will defeat him just militarily. Not through diplomacy, so militarily they will defeat. They will have to get out of Russia and close the border because Ukrainians will invade Russia and will topple the Russia and will take Kremlin. How about that?
Hey, sounds good to me and everything. But I have a question for Chris. Actually, it's a two-part question that I'm very curious about from a military standpoint. I would love to hear his thoughts about this. One of them is a very, well, actually, they're both kind of deep questions. But one is, we know that what Putin is saying is that part of the reason that he is wanting to take back the Ukraine is because it was a former member of the Soviet Union, and all along those lines, as you have alluded to, it's got a lot of mineral riches and things of that nature. And we could say the same thing about Taiwan in terms of China getting back control of Taiwan and things along those lines. I imagine, and this, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that their counter argument would be that there are certain countries in the world that are under Western rule and that are having Western powers that are above them. I'm thinking about Bermuda, which is British ruled, and I'm also thinking about Puerto Rico, which is under the American eye and all of that, and is not currently the 51st state, but a separate nation. So I was wondering from a military standpoint if that is something that Putin and others may use as one of their counter arguments. And then along those same lines, I was actually on one of my favorite rooms in terms of apps and things of that nature in Clubhouse, and they were talking about whether or not this man is actually crazy enough to press the button. I personally think that he probably is, but I was just wondering your thoughts, or do you think that he's got enough sanity to not push the button and go nuclear? But I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those.
All right, so let's go the first route with China.
Right.
First of all, Taiwan is a separate country. That's right. Puerto Rico is not a separate country. It is an American protectorate, and that means that they could make their play for statehood, and that would be perfectly legitimate, along with the Azores, along with Well, actually, yours isn't even ours. It's not American.
Sorry, Chris,
Along
when
with
you say that's going to be legitimate, would it be legitimate for other protectorates like American Samoa to become
Yes.
states as well?
Absolutely.
Protectorates are not states.
Right. No, they're not. No. But they can make their play for states. They can actually put enough, if enough of Congress believes they should be become part of the statehood, then they could actually make their play and become part of the statehood. You got to remember that the last state was accepted in was Hawaii. Right. So I mean so all these things that's that part of it. China does not look upon Taiwan as something that can somehow increase their minerals or increase it's all has to do with the message. If you're Taiwan, we want you. The same with Hong Kong. Hong Kong, the only reason China took Hong Kong was because the lease ran out. So, I mean, basically, that was the situation with that. And that, I'm not saying China threatens the East. I'm saying basically that they want this Lebensraum, this living space, this hegemony that they want Taiwan. They've always wanted Taiwan, but they're never going to take it by force. I'm telling you, they're going to siege the place and let the Taiwanese just basically starve. And then, when they're ready, then they'll say, okay, enough is enough. Yeah, okay, China will become part of you. I mean, they're not going to fire a shot other than the number of planes they'll shoot down.
Yeah, just really quickly, is Bermuda have that same lease with the British? Because they've been under British rule for I don't know how long, but it's been a long time.
Bahamas broke away. From British rule. They were a mess for the first, I think, 5-10 years. I mean, they were a real mess, and they finally, Bahamas is finally. I mean, they've come up to a pretty good country overall. I mean, but Belize is pretty. It's British. I mean, still. So I mean, it's a situation where you have all these different areas that. But let's go through. We can take all that and make it what it is. But I wanted to respond to Sasha on some of the points. So I did some research this weekend on Putin, and I did some research on withholding military aid. First of all, Obama and Biden, because he was vice president and he takes part of the deal, they withheld military aid from Ukraine because of corruption in Ukraine. They withheld it. They said, okay, we'll give you aid, but it's going to be basically, we'll give you MREs and we'll give you things that are non-destructive. And that was because of corruption in that country. George W. Bush withheld aid from 35 different countries when he was president. 35 because of distinctive reasons. So I'm not saying, the reason that Trump withheld aid is basically Vindman and the rest of them said, hey, look, this guy just threatened Zelensky. If you don't investigate Hunter Biden, then we're going to withhold aid. But in actuality, Obama told Zelensky, you've got to stop corruption in your country before we give you got to get control of corruption in your country before we give you military aid. And so I think now that military aid from Trump was later released. I mean, so he later released that aid. But the bottom line is that Ukraine has been a problem. I mean, let me tell you something, man. You got to treat Putin like a 2-year-old. If you let a 2-year-old stay up past their bedtime, they're going to stay up past their bedtime. And let me tell you, if you give him land, which they gave him, we literally gave him Crimea. Here's Crimea, 2014. Here it is. I mean, out of shot fired, he annexed Crimea. And from that, to me, was the biggest mistake you ever do to anybody that has megalomania. And let me tell you something. This guy, I researched Putin. Man, he was working with a Stasi in East Germany when the wall came down. He was saving documents, literally saving documents for the Soviet archives. Why would you save documents for a Soviet archive when the Soviet Union no longer exists? That's the thinking of this guy. His thinking is the Soviet Union is going to return. What I did was I took 2 of his speeches, one in 2007, 2021, and I compared them from a textual standpoint, textual data. And I'd be more than happy to show them to you. But basically, you can see the difference of the words that are used in the speech in 2007 to to the words that he used in the speech in 2022. So that is, I mean, this guy is unstoppable. Sasha, I hope that Ukraine goes into Russia. I hope they teach this guy a lesson. If he wants to use nuclear weapons, and they're saying, oh, he's going to use nuclear weapons, he's not going to use ICBMs. He's going to use tactical nuclear weapons. If put into a corner, that's what he's going to start using.
Yeah, and use it on the Ukraine if they invade
There
Russia.
is a scenario where he is going to use ICBM. You know what? He's now cut off almost $1 trillion of his own funds. I mean, it's not his own; it's Russia funds.
Sure,
but
that's right.
he rules Russia, so indirectly he owns this $1 trillion. And now he's been cut from $1 trillion. Wouldn't you go for a nuclear war for $1 trillion? I would.
Well, first of all, I think Sasha, I'll tell you, you get a guy pushed, you get a dog pushed into a corner, they're gonna bite you. I mean, they don't give a crap if you're trying to give them food or a stick across the head. They're gonna bite your hand. And let me tell you, you back this guy into a corner, something's gonna happen bad. So my recommendation, and I'm not an expert in this, and to tell the truth, the honest God truth, I'm hearing from these experts like General Barry McCaffrey. Really? General Barry McCaffrey, the failed drug czar of the Clinton administration, is out there making comments about Ukraine. It's like, are you kidding me, pal? So there's people that are making comments. It's like, you're the same as me.
What you might want to ask this guy,
what you might
want to ask this guy before he was a general, what exactly was his MOS? Because that might enlighten us as to whether or not he has any experience at all or any idea what he's talking about.
I mean, to tell the truth, Vindman, I mean, as much as everyone sits there and just vilifies the guy and a lot of vitriol concerning him, the guy is got a Purple Heart, Legion of Merit. He was brought up in Ukraine. The guy has a lot of, I mean, what he did going straight to the House Intelligence Committee and getting subpoenaed by them and all that. I don't know about all that, but the bottom line is he speaks more from a standpoint of expertise than any of these 4-star generals that are sitting out there for NBC or anybody else saying, oh yeah, this is what happens in this. They throw up a map and then they start pointing to arrows. You know, they're like a football coach. Cut me a break. You know, this guy is totally and completely unpredictable. You know, he's going to sit there in Ukraine. And the only reason he wants Ukraine, why would you take, let me ask you a question. And Sasha, you may be able to answer this, and Shaquille or whomever. Why would he take an exclusion area around a nuclear power plant that basically just, imploded? Why would you want that exclusion area? Why would you want that area around there? Does anybody know?
Control.
Yeah, it's all about
He wants to control this. He wants to pretend that now everybody is going to dance to my music because otherwise I will just explode this all, and all Ukraine will be radioactive for years and so on. So this is the issue of control. But the major question again being asked, and I've seen many programs, both in English and Russian lately, what is the primary reason for Putin to invade the Ukraine? And there are a lot of different answers to that. I would like to know if Shaquille would provide the answer. Why Russia invaded Ukraine?
Well, look, obviously, Sasha, because you're from there, so I can only make peripheral comments about it, and I obviously don't understand the issues, and I know that Ukrainians are very patriotic to their nation. But what I say to Americans who also lack context as well is that no country anywhere in the world is perfect, and for people to jump up and say, well, Putin's a dictator, Putin has interfered with international elections. Which ones exactly? Because the only one the Democrats will point to is the Trump election, because it's unfathomable to them that Trump actually won. Which elections other than that has he interfered with? And for Ukraine being the shining beacon of world democracy, a country that locks up its political opponents, that censors its media, this is not how a democracy works. Now, I'm not saying that to be critical as such of the Ukraine, but every country has its problems and every country has its issues. Look, I don't like what Putin's doing, but I don't like it simply because I think that countries that want to have their own independence should have that. But I also think that the argument that he makes, which is that there are people in the Ukraine that are more aligned with Russia and want to be part of Russia, should be able to have that. Much in the same way as I kind of, looking back through history, and obviously because some of the comments that Mark Lee has said to me and the tearing down of statues in the southern states, I thought I might actually look at the history of the South. And now I have the luxury of being able to waste my time looking at historical issues that don't matter anymore. Where obviously when I was younger, I didn't have that sort of time. And the more I read about the South, I think it was an incredible abuse to have the South stay in the Union. If they wanted to secede, they should have been able to. So here's my question. And I think Steve alluded to this, if the South had have seceded, but there were some people in southern country, the Confederate, say there was the Union at the north and there was the Confederate in the south, but there were some people living in Confederate states and areas who felt that they were more aligned with the horrific values of the North. Should the North have some claim and say, hey, we're gonna come in and take this area or that area or whatever? And if they did, if that was the situation, which international powers exactly would have any right to come in and interfere and take sides in that argument? Now, what we know is, everyone says that the Northerners did such a great job, the Unionists did such a great job, and they defeated the South and they defeated the British, but they didn't defeat the British on their own. They had help.
That's
from the
correct.
Dutch. They had help from the French. They had help from everybody else, which of course they did because, you can't beat the English without it. So, Chris's favourite French people, they were right there and involved. So what would happen today? That's, I think, a very interesting question. Let's just say, and I hope it doesn't happen because the United States is a perfectly good country the way it is, but it's becoming a lot more divided. Let's just say that the southern states were to secede today, and really it wouldn't be the southern states. It would sort of be the southern and the centre, sort of the heartland of the United States, with the coastal areas being one country divided by this sort of red tranche through the middle. And the electoral maps don't actually support that either, but let's just say that happened theoretically. Let's just say that happened, right? And there was a push for that, and America just had some sort of conflict over that. Should Russia and China come in and start taking sides? Should Canada or the UK or Australia come in and say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that? Surely, if people feel strongly enough, even places whose politics I don't agree with, like California, if they feel strongly enough that they should be their own nation, surely they have the right to have some sort of democratic process where the people can vote on that. And if they want to secede, they should be able to. I don't see what the problem is.
So I don't quite get your logic. I'm so sorry. Ukraine became independent state in 1991. Okay, now it's over 30 years. It's independent state. Now, what Mr. Putin has to do with invading an independent state?
What
you
I'm
were
saying,
talking about the south and north.
Okay, so they were.
I don't get all that.
So I used an example there, Sasha, to highlight my point, which was that in the dissolution of the USSR, many countries were formed, and I think that there is obviously still some tension about that, right? There is still some animosity about that.
Even 30 years later.
Sorry?
30 years later.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, Sasha. I'm just saying that there's certainly still some people that believe that the USSR should still exist and that these countries should be theirs. What I'm saying is, from a Western perspective, how much do we want to get involved in that? I don't think that...
You're right. I agree with you. I agree.
I don't think that the people in the Ukraine should be forced back into Russia, for example, by force. But I think that it's more complicated than simply saying that Russia and Putin is just infringing on their democracy or their sovereignty. There are some people in the Ukraine that would prefer to be part of Russia. And some areas that would prefer to be part of Russia. And there are some areas that would prefer to be part of an independent and sovereign Ukraine. And for us to go in there when we don't understand the geopolitics, we don't understand the long tensions.
Don't worry, you will not go there. They will come here. That's what's going to happen. You will not go there, and West will not get involved because the gasoline will go up 5 cents a liter. And you know what? If you will crawl and get on your knees to Mr. Putin, he will give you 5 cents discount. So
Hey, Shaquille, just really quickly and everything. You were talking about foreign aid in the Civil War. There actually was an attempted foreign aid in the Civil War. The Confederates actually did make an appeal to the British to try to get money, and some of those great warships that the Confederates had were actually built in British territory and things along
Very
those lines,
good, Mark.
even though none of the European countries actually declared their support of the Confederacy. And there were even Union and definitely Confederate forces that were from other countries as well. So there was, even in that centuries ago, some attempts at some foreign influence or trying to get foreign folks to help out on one side or the other. And those are just two examples that I gave.
Well, Britain wasn't exactly foreign, though, was it? Right? Because you know, the People's Democratic Republic of New England, or as you like to call yourselves, the United States of America, you know, you guys may well, you know, like to forget that you have that British heritage, but you actually do have the British heritage. And talking about New England, one only has to see the abuses of the South at the behest of these thugs up in New England. Right, the sort of shenanigans that went on in the northern states, right, against the South, and we like to rewrite history now and say that the entire thing was about slavery. Slavery was part of it. It would be foolish to say that it wasn't, and it was certainly a positive thing that under any way that it was achieved that the slaves were emancipated. But to try to make out that this was these, you know, people with these moral highs, you know, the sort of glory of humanity in the northern states that went down selflessly to free the slaves is a complete lie. And I don't think that the Unionists would have won without the assistance of France and Denmark. Didn't the Spanish help them? I mean, they had so much help from so many countries in Europe, not because the countries in Europe agreed with them. That's not why they helped.
That's right.
The reason why they helped was because they didn't like England. Now, fair, I can understand.
It was also the matter of the cotton. I mean, a lot of them needed cotton for their textile mills in places like England and France and things of that nature. So they definitely needed that, and all along those lines. By the way, I need both of you, Shaquille and Sasha, to join me on, and I'm gonna tell you why, particularly Sasha and everything, because when I was in Clubhouse, I met a young lady named Yvonne Renee Davis. I've invited her to come on our show and everything, and she is a former appointee. Sasha, you'll love this. She's a former appointee of President George W. Bush, and she is an internationally recognized communications speaker, leadership development trainer, and award-winning journalist. I love her title. I'm a fixer who handles and resolves crisis by providing high-level strategy. So she's got a 30-year background, and she was definitely involved in the whole area of the Ukraine as well as other parts of the world. As a matter of fact, I think she said that she's done some teaching in the Ukraine as well. But she is one of your favorite people, Mr. Bush's appointees. So I want you to come on next week.
What time is it?
This will be during my online dinner party, so that should be on next Wednesday. So not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday.
I do have the arguments that come in from the other side. In case you guys don't know, the supporters of Putin do exist. Go to this website. This is in the Facebook group, Understanding China. China is a big supporter of President Putin and anti-West. And here are their reasons why you guys are all wrong. Putin is right. Let's go to, what is that? Life coach?
Life.
I have that. Success inspired by the world's most powerful man.
There we go. You got a black book. Okay. Here's reason number one. The West is wrong. Remember the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The United States invaded a territorial country on a false pretext under George Bush. Yes, exactly.
Agreed.
What would you rather? What would you rather?
I would rather read none of them. None of the above. Is that a choice? Okay. Reason number one. The West is wrong. Oh gosh, please.
The beautiful poetry of Donald Trump.
Oh, I can't. I don't know if I can handle
poetry by Donald Trump. That's something everyone's going to read.
The reason the West is wrong is the West is hypocrites. Because you're hypocrites, because of the weapons and mass destruction, you invaded Iraq And so hence Putin has the right to invade Ukraine. Reason number 2, you're wrong. The United States invaded Afghanistan. Okay, where did they get the right to invade Afghanistan? In addition to Iraq, in addition to Syria, in addition to Yugoslavia, that gives Putin the right to invade the Ukraine. Number 3 reason you're wrong. These Warsaw Pact nations are all of a sudden NATO nations, and they're installing nuclear weapons on the backyards of Russia. And number 4 reason the West is wrong is, well, arming Cuba. How would you like the Russians to go to Cuba and arm Cuba? Would you feel comfortable with that? Well, obviously not, and you would do something. Hence, for those reasons, if you want to go argue with these people, the people that are behind Putin is China. And go to Understanding China Facebook group. You'll get to talk to all of them. I invite everybody to do that and watch how much they hate the West and China. That's my speech for the day.
Well done. May I respond to that?
Please.
I'd like,
Of course,
okay.
I'm just backstage. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Sasha.
sure, no problem. Okay, I just would like to offer this opinion. When there was a Cold War running from essentially 1940, not 5, but 1948, I would say for sure, when it was a blockade of West Berlin by Russians, running to approximately 1991 or so, everybody thought. Maybe it's not really the right fact, but at least by Soviet Union being dissolved, how could that be a war anymore? But Western powers, headed by George Bush Sr., failed to engrave in stone that Russia or Soviet Union, or whatever you want to call it, are losers. They lost Cold War. And as losers, they cannot, by definition, have the same rights as the winner. How Putin can pretend, oh, you did Yugoslavia, you did this, you did that. As the winners, West could do exactly that. And Russia and Putin are losers. And losers cannot, by definition, have the same rights as the winners. I'm done.
Hey, Sasha, just really quickly, I did have one other quick question for you and everything. And it's just based on, I'm not that familiar with that country and everything, but I have been watching some of the news reports and things along that lines. And one of the things that they have been talking about has been, and I know y'all get tired of me talking about this particular topic, but the divide that exists between people of another nation and the Ukrainian people, because I've heard that some of the folks are having a hard time getting out if they are Nigerian students and things along those lines. So I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about the relationship between foreign students and the Ukrainian people, because that is a topic that I've heard come up in some of the conversations where they've been saying that there's an effort to keep the Nigerians in a war-torn area.
Before you respond to that, Sasha, can I say so very quickly? Clearly something's gone very badly wrong with how Russia has developed since USSR was dissolved, because and this exists in some way for some of the Eastern Bloc countries, but if you have a look at Germany after the end of World War II, and you have a look at where they are, not just today, but where they were in the decade or so after the end of the World War, they really rebounded. Their economy came back very strongly. They still had their problems, but they, became a very strong democratic country. They had all sorts of economic growth. Their people had very, very good lifestyles. Same thing with Japan. Japan's had problems with deflation, and they've had issues with their currency. But, by and large, they've become a very, very successful country. Their people's lives have been improved. Now, I dare say that Russians' lives have improved, especially in St. Petersburg and Moscow, but they haven't had the same sort of economic clout and respect internationally that they would have. And being a country of their size with their mineral wealth, if Russia did the right things, you would expect them to be a mega economy. You would expect them to have such a massive impact on world events and be a real international player. That hasn't happened. And you have to put that down to leadership, right? There's something wrong with leadership.
Shaquille, I would like to ask you,
Yeah.
your facts are absolutely correct, and I totally agree. But what would be your explanation why that happened?
Well, no, what I just said. It's leadership. Look, I don't understand Russia well enough, but what I do understand about Russia is what I complain about in America, America's political system is crony capitalism, where people lobby government for special favor. And I don't think that should be allowed because I think it hurts everybody. If I'm going to make that complaint about the United States and other Western countries, like the ones that I'm a citizen of, Australia and the UK, and I level that complaint against Canada, I can't not level the complaint against Russia. The problem is that in Russia, my understanding, not being from there, my understanding of what goes on there is that it's very much a matter of who you know, and it's very much a matter of whose hands you what's the saying? Whose pockets you grease, whatever the saying is. That's the situation there. So I still think that whilst Russia appears to be a country trying to become more democratic and transparent, it has a long way to go. And I think that when you've got people that make money from their government positions, it's hard to give up. So I put the whole thing down to leadership. I don't think it's about the people. I know there's a high rate of alcoholism amongst men over there. And I know that, people have their issues. All countries suffer from that. But it comes down to leadership and it comes down to the people in charge. And when people in charge screw it up, it's the people themselves, the people of the country that suffer.
Yeah, I think you're right. And before we get into some other issues, I think
Sasha was about to say something.
Sasha, go ahead.
Could you, Steve, eliminate all other issues, because this one is more important than all other issues put together?
Yeah, we'll focus on this. So what do you think?
Shakil, tell me one thing. First of all, you remember any time in history of Russia that it was a democratic country? I'll answer that. Absolutely no.
I don't believe so. No.
Absolutely no. Okay, there was a very interesting one, Ukrainian publicist, Mr. Gordon, in his show. There was a picture of Putin. And he is asking, Mr. Putin, look at your watch. It's a Swiss watch. Look at your suit. It's Italian suit. Look at your socks. They are French, right? And your shoes are from England. What Russian stuff do you have on you or your relative or your friends? What Russia is producing beside war, beside death? What is Russia in the world? Or this ugly stuff like oil and gas, which is actually financing your war machine. Without Germany buying hundreds of billions of dollars of gas, would Russia have all this money to invade neighboring independent country? Absolutely not. But situation may change very soon. My suggestion is.
But again, Sasha, just to kind of repeat what I said there, that comes down to leadership. Because if you take away all the politics of the situation, Russia has some enormous advantages and an enormous what I consider to be wealth. So like I consider India to be very wealthy in that it has the world's largest population under 30, under 35 that are university qualified, well-qualified people. You talk to people from Petersburg and Moscow, very intelligent people, great qualifications. There's a lot of people that live in rural areas around Russia. There's a lot of agriculture. There is a huge opportunity for manufacturing. There are so many things that Russia could do that would bring them into the international fray, that would achieve a couple of things: build up their international respect and also improve the lives of the everyday people. And when we talk about Russia, we talk about it politically. What I think is really sad is that there is a Russian family somewhere in Russia whose lives are being disrupted, not because of anything that they have done, because of something that distant government has done to them or has done to the country. And it's the same thing with Ukraine or Afghanistan. When America and allies went into Afghanistan, there are families over in Afghanistan that had nothing to do with this. They're just trying to survive, feed their kids, have a life.
Come on, don't mix Afghanistan with Ukraine. What are you doing?
I'm not mixing
up. What problem is there between population of Afghanistan and population of Ukraine? Ukraine was never invaded by anybody since 1944 when it was liberated
Sasha,
from Germans. And Ukraine will never be overrun by
I didn't
anybody.
compare the two. I just said it's very sad when you say that people, individual people that aren't government people, are affected by conflicts that are caused by their political leaders. You have to feel for those people. And what I'm answering your original question, which was, what do I think's gone wrong in Russia? Political leadership. What do I think's going wrong in the United States? Political leadership. I think this is the same thing around the world. Government is the problem, not the people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And along those same lines, and that's actually what I was getting ready to ask Chris, because it was partially what I was trying to bring in when I was talking about those African nations and everything. If you've got people like Nigeria, South Africa, and other African governments scrambling on today to help their citizens escape the Russian invasion in Ukraine after reports of unfair treatment of Africans at border crossings, some that are claiming that it was racist, some that may not be claiming that and everything, doesn't that sow the seed of discontent that then makes it easier for people like China, which are already going into Africa for economic gains and things of that nature, to further their stronghold into those nations when these kind of reports happen in these kind of world conflicts, and particularly this one that's going on in the Ukraine? I'd love to hear Chris's thoughts on that.
Well, I will give you a statement that was said to me one time from a Nigerian professor at an institution where I was teaching. And he said, they wanted to count him as a minority instructor. And he said, I'm not a minority instructor. He says, I'm Nigerian. He says, in my country, I'm not a minority. Yes, I'm a minority here in the United States, and I'm not an American citizen. I'm not African American. I'm African. Yeah. So, and what happens is that I think in this situation, what's happening is that you have the differences between you have a lot of different nationalities basically in Russia. A ton of nationalities, but when you talk about color aspects, it's language, it's culture, it's those types of differences that are so. But it's interesting. It is interesting from that standpoint. But yes, absolutely. If the Africans are feeling that they're not being treated, with any type of deference to get out of there, or even the same of getting out of a country that's currently under war, under combat. The Chinese is currently getting a foothold, although the Russians are also getting a foothold in Africa. I just wanted to let you know, Chinese are much better at it. The Russians, they say, here's a bunch of arms, and the Chinese say, we're going to give you cell towers. So that
can I just clarify what the suggestion here is? So the border guards in neighboring countries are looking at people and saying, you have the wrong skin complexion, so we're not going to let you enter our country. We're only going to let Ukrainian white Ukrainian people and other people from other countries who are white. So if you're from another country and you're white, you can come in to ours, but if you're not white, you can't. Is that what you're suggesting is happening?
That's what is being suggested is being happened by some of those students that are coming from those countries.
Does that sound realistic to you, really?
I mean, there are countries that have a certain kind of standpoint and a certain kind of nationalistic pride. So yes, it does seem realistic to me that there may be people that are.
Which countries neighboring the Ukraine, do you believe, have border agents that are judging people by their skin color as to whether or not that they can transit, because they're not coming there as refugees if they're a citizen of a third country. They're not coming there as refugees, they're transiting the nation.
The world has had this happen several times, and it's happened even recently in the years of 2022, 2021, and 2020. This is not anything new where race has played a part in border crossings and things of that nature. And yes, it is real, and whether it's happened of African nations or other nations. And yes, there are some border people at the borders that are very racist and have some racist attitudes. And yes, they will definitely have those orders. Now, whether those orders are coming from the top down.
How do you know that, Mark? Have you been there? Have you experienced it? Have you seen it?
I have talked to people like Chris had just said. I've talked to people from those countries as well, and they have told me that, and I have believed have every right to believe their situation as they have described it to me. Have I been there? I've said before that I have not done enough international travel. I'm not you, Shaquille. I've not done enough international travel. That's something that I would like to do more of and everything.
May I help you understand this case?
Thank
There were trains that were departing from Ukraine to other countries like Poland, Hungary, maybe Romania, and so on. Now, the policy of Ukraine today is that all men between 18 and 60 remain in Ukraine, fight. Now, the children, women, older people, they all have to go to these countries like Poland, Hungary, and Romania. So the trains they are first ones who occupy all seats in the trains, and even, believe it, citizens of Poland and Hungary and Romania, they are barred from even entering the railway train station. They are not, because women and children is priority. So if some Nigerians were barred from boarding these trains, I understand that. But do they have more rights than citizens of Poland or Hungary or Romania to board the trains? I don't believe so.
But see, the problem, Sasha, is that when somebody thinks and has that chip on their shoulder that everything must be about race, they won't look at it like you just have. They'll say,
Nigerian presidential advisor Garba Shehu has said in a statement, and this is what he said: all who flee a conflict situation have the same right to safe passage under UN convention, and the color of their passport or their skin should make no difference. So, like I said, there are some reports coming from his country that there are people that are being denied because of the color of their passport, and that's something that he's saying that should not be an issue.
Mark, I think you should have Ukraine is a war-torn country, okay?
It comes down to the internet. The internet. Look, guys.
But I could enter the United States under the visa.
Hold on a second. Chris had a point he wanted to make. I want to hear from Chris.
But if I come from sub-Saharan Africa, if I come from Pakistan,
I'll get in there.
Come in a Pakistani passport, I'm not going to be able to enter. Is that because of the color of my skin? No, it's not the same skin color as the Pakistanis. It's because of the passport of the country I'm coming from.
Shaquille, you're right. You know, we're discussing stuff that just came over social media. Basically, is what's going on, the social media aspect and everything else. You know, there was a report this morning that why is it that Putin is still allowing Russian internet to be in Ukraine? He should shut off the internet and shut off communications. I wouldn't do that. I would take stories like you just read, Mark, and I would make the Polish and Hungarian look racist. See, this is what we're fighting against. We're trying to put a kibosh on the fascists that are in Ukraine right now. 243,000 fought with Hitler in Nazi Germany. There were death camps in Ukraine. We are going to put a stop to that. You know how we're going to do it? We're going to invade, and we're going to completely, reroute this whole thing. You know,
whose team are you on? Vladimir Putin's watching this show. Whose team are you on over here?
But on those same lines, and I know that you said you didn't want to deal with other news articles, but this one actually does tie into a little bit of the Ukraine, because one of our favorite Republicans apparently spoke before a meeting of white nationalists who apparently support Russian President
Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's worse.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And
who said that, even the RNC chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, said white supremacy, neo-Nazism, hate speech, and bigotry are disgusted and do not have a home in the Republican Party. Now, she did say that she was not going to be drawn into guilt by association games in which you demand every conservative should justify anything ever said by anyone they've ever shared a room with. And I do see that you can be in a room with somebody that you do not agree with. So I would agree with her on that part and everything. But I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about this that took place this weekend as well.
Mark, who was the Republican? Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
She went out. Now it's incredible because I've traveled all through the United States. You know what? I've not met, except for really old guys, right, who once were. I've not met. I'm a little bit younger than you, Nick. I've not met anybody who was a member of the Klan. I've not met anybody who's a neo-Nazi or a Nazi or a white supremacist skinhead. haven't met any, and I've been all through this. I've gone looking for them, haven't been able to find them. So tell me,
You're not looking hard enough.
You're
I
not
can
looking
bring
hard
it
enough.
up.
I've met them.
or is it just as usual? People that don't agree with the woke bullshit, therefore must be neo-Nazis. You know
Well,
how I
first
know?
off, you're not looking hard enough. I can find you some.
Let's give you an example. Let's give you an example of how I know how full of shit you woke people are. I was in the UK, a country that I'm actually a citizen of, and they had the Brexit versus Remain protests going on. I was staying at the Hilton Hotel. I was at the Presidential Suite in Park Lane, Mayfair, and I heard the report on TV, and there was going to be 700,000 people there, and I thought, wow. Because I come from a place, Western Australia, where there's not even 700,000 people living in the city. So I thought, I wonder what 700,000 people actually look like. And I saw it from my hotel window, and I thought, that looks incredible. So I came downstairs and watched it. Then I watched the Remain protest, which had like 2 people in it. And as I'm watching these people come by, they're waving an Israeli flag. There was a police officer there, and I said, I'm just curious. I just don't understand. What does remaining or not remaining in the EU have to do with Israel? And he looked at me and said, I have no idea. I said, why are they waving that flag? And then somebody walks up to me from the protest and says, you're a skinhead. And back then I had long hair. I said, what? He goes, you're a skin-headed racist Nazi. What? This was somebody who was white. So when you say that Marjorie Taylor Greene addressed a room full of neo-Nazis, let's put this in context, please. Tell me who these Nazis are. Tell me why they're Nazis. What have they said or done? Have they sworn an allegiance to kill, Jews?
Well, it was actually an alternative conference to the regular Conservative Political Action Committee. It was the America's first political actions conference, and it was an alternative. And the organizer, Nicholas Fontes, has been cited several times for his extremist views, including some views that were definitely known as supremacists, white supremacists, and all of that. You said, and just really quickly, Shaquille, hold on a second, Shaquille, and I'm going to get back to whatever other counter argument you're going to make, but you said that you couldn't find a skinhead. I can tell you that a good friend of mine that is actually, and it has nothing to do with this incident
Look, I had to go get a hair replacement
down from our Durham City Council office, Charlie Reese and everything, actually had a encounter with a skinhead, because the skinhead was right in his face and basically told him that he was a skinhead and all of that, and that he was a racist and a neo-Nazi and all of that. As a matter of fact, his wife, that's one of the things when he stepped down that he said his wife might have been a little bit upset at him for, because he stood up to this racist and everything, and they joke about it now. But like I said, he had a big knife in the whole 9 yards on him.
So the guy has made comments which are extreme. Okay, such as what?
I will find you the exact comments that he made, but they were definitely within that.
So if I make extreme comments, right? Like for example, I make extreme comments about chess. I love the King's Gambit. I actually had my ass handed to me last night by somebody who was not as good as me. So I stopped playing King's Gambit and played something else. And I actually looked up the games I played with Sasha and started using his opens, which didn't work for me either. So I used some of my old opens, right? But
well, that's what he said. I'm going to give you an exact quote. This is from the conference. This is from the conference.
I'm halfway through saying something. By your analogy, because Sasha is a friend of mine and I like the King's Gambit, Sasha must also be a King Gambit supporter.
Well, no, let's just hear this exact quote. Hold on. This is an exact quote from Fonte at the conference. Hold on. You wanted an exact quote. I found you the exact quote. Now they're going on about Vladimir Putin and Russia, and Vladimir Putin is Hitler. And they say that's not a good thing. Smiling Fontes added that, I shouldn't have said that. And then he laughed. So he's comparing Putin to Hitler, and he's saying that it's maybe not as bad as folks are making it out to be and all of that. And then the crowd started chanting Putin, Putin. So they were actually backing Putin at this particular conference and everything, which is the reason that folks...
So therefore they white supremacist Nazis. I love it.
It's time to close out, folks. It's time to close out. We'll be back tomorrow. This was a very important topic as we close out today about Russia and Ukraine, the future of democracy, what we often call a democratic recession. Is democracy on the decline in the U.S.? Have we reached a point in the world order where autocracy and dictatorship will prevail over free nations? Only time will tell what will happen in the situation in Ukraine. But from our family to everyone out there in Ukraine, we pray. We pray for your families. We pray for those that are being killed. We pray for peace. We hope it's not too late to bring a diplomatic solution to this crisis. We especially want to thank Sasha Starr for enlightening us so much with his expertise on Russia, being an immigrant from Russia. And I think we're going to continue to talk about this over the week. We'll be seeing you tomorrow, hopefully on Roku. I don't know. I haven't checked my TV, but hopefully the World Edition will be on there. And we want to thank everyone for being with us today. Thank you all so much. We pray for anyone out there, from our family to yours. Let's get through another day, wherever you are in the world.
And hopefully folks will be going over to the Economics Monday show, which is actually going on right now. And hopefully they'll also be heading over to Media Monday, in which I know we'll also be discussing the media's coverage of what's going on in the war in the Ukraine and all of that as well. So that'll be at noon, so about an hour from now, in that sense. So hopefully folks will be checking that out. And of course, tomorrow, we've got two shows that'll be featuring this issue, because we've got our regular show, World Edition, and then our Tuesday and Friday show about international politics, featuring Sasha Starr, who has left the building, and Chris Greco as well. So we're looking forward to those conversations also. So we're going to get on out of here.